We watched House from 1977.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my god. The piano's eating her. And then it's going to eat me.
Oh.
Oh my god. What'd you think, Ryan?
House or Hausu from 1977, a horror comedy directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, produced by Toho Studios.
Wait. Is it supposed to be a high comedy?
I think it just ended up being a comedy.
It is pretty funny. It's very charming.
I like it.
I like it too.
I like this movie a lot.
I like this movie.
This movie is I don't think I fall into a minority of people that like this is weaseled into an interesting spot in they're like
in their hearts.
Yeah.
No, it's become quite the cult classic for sure.
Definitely. I think something that gets that has definitely gotten more recognition or at least more popular over the years.
Definitely.
Probably over it feels like in the West more.
Yeah, I don't even know if people talk about it anymore. Like, who knows if it even has a cult?
Maybe it's like an old meme in Japan and they're like over the joke or whatever.
Who knows?
But
I'm gonna ask people now. But I will say that it was a big success in the 70s, late 70s in Japan, but not critically whatsoever.
Yeah, critically panned.
But like a lot of the follow-up that I was reading about never really happened. You know, they talked about making a sequel, and he decided that it was better off as a one-off.
Which is wise, just very smart decision.
Yeah, I think it's a wise decision. And then Obayashi, who directed it, almost made his own Godzilla movie. But what he came up with is very weird. So I don't know. Actually, though, like
it sounds actually like a proto-Space Godzilla script.
Yeah.
Or spec, like what you described.
Yeah. All right. So what happens in his spec Godzilla is it's like it would have been like the 16th Godzilla, so it's not like an early Godzilla story.
Right.
Like lots of Godzilla things have happened. There's lots of kaiju situations.
Right.
A little girl named Momo finds Godzilla's corpse, like dead under the ground, and Godzilla is actually a different kind of alien, and the corpse is pregnant and it died of diabetes, and they need the brain of the corpse tells all the humans to send the Godzilla body back to Planet Godzilla, which for me, by the way, is very like Planet Poochie from like, they remember Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie? Like, I have to return to my planet. But anyways, so they have to send the body back because it's pregnant, and then it meets up with its own father on Planet Godzilla, and then it fights an alien that shoots fire out of its boobs, which really does feel very Obayashi. Because like I'm surprised there's no monster in this that shoots fire out of its boobs, because there's a lot of boobs in this movie and no fire. So there is some fire, I guess. Doesn't she burns up her her auntie?
I guess
her new stepmom. Yeah, her new stepmom.
Yeah, which
maybe we should just go over the plot of the movie first.
Maybe. So House
1977. What's the director's name? Obayashi. What's his first name?
Nobuhiko Obayashi.
Interesting guy. Supposedly, his 12-year-old daughter came up with like a good portion of the story beats for it, which is, I think, part of why they're so peculiar and fun.
I think honestly the most interesting aspects of it is like how it kind of got developed, where Toho came to Obayashi and asked him to create a movie like Jaws. And he brought them House.
Yeah, Too Long Didn't Read. He didn't bring them a movie like Jaws.
He did not bring them Jaws. And
it's actually interesting. He almost brought them an antithesis to Jaws. He brings them an opposite of Jaws. Jaws is like a very realistic kind of horror. It's like the hard sci-fi of horror. You know, it's like, you know, it's a realistically terrifying entity.
Right. It's the beach.
Right.
Yeah. And your local government lying to you.
Yeah, and a really, really big shark.
The shark's a metaphor for capitalism.
But in House, what he seems to have gone for is an attempt to explore the terrifying, you know, of the ununderstandable. You know, so he
incomprehensible.
Yeah, exactly. His 12-year-old daughter came up with a bunch of incomprehensible, horrifying situations, and they like made a story out of it, and they're pretty fun.
So we aren't the only ones to recognize that it is incomprehensible. Toho Studios recognized that it was absolutely incomprehensible, and
Which is what they decided to make it.
this movie I think sat in development for 2 years before it was like anything actually started shooting. And in the meantime, Obayashi made a lot of TV commercials and short films, but he wasn't allowed to direct the film because he wasn't a Toho employee or Toho staff, and no Toho director wanted to touch the film because they didn't understand the script at all. So over that period of 2 years, Obayashi was essentially gathering the cast and making friends. A lot of the actors in the film are actually just models that he knew from shooting commercials
for like karupisu and stuff like that. Yeah. Which is like a milky soft drink from Japan.
Which
FYI.
is it's honestly not that bad.
I like it.
I like it.
I like it too. I like karupisu.
And eventually Toho relented because then they thought what was it? They were losing so much money on comprehensible films that they wanted to take their bet
a risk on something incomprehensible, which is pretty.
They gave Obayashi special permission, despite not being a Toho employee, to direct this film, and that's how House eventually got made.
Well, what's even crazier is this guy was so balls to the wall in making this project happen that he kept making different versions of it before he could be given. So like, I guess the script is in their system. They're trying to find someone to direct it. They've kind of greenlit it. And then he went and made a radio drama. And like, he went and like made a bunch of different other versions of it to like prove that it had appeal and prove that he was the person who should make it. So this is a very pushy guy, and he really got what he wanted. And what he got is like this wildly Yodorovskian kind of
never give up on your dreams.
Yeah, never give up on bullying Toho into
never
helping
give
you
up.
make your dreams. But yeah, he had like a preteen daughter who came up with like a bunch of these like what she felt were like terrifying circumstances.
Which, when you really boil it down, it kind of is pretty terrifying.
It is pretty scary. I mean, all of it is objectively scary, but it is funny because they are very much they feel like straight from a child's imagination. And he attempted, I think, to make a lot of the visual elements of it look like things from a child's imagination as well.
Yes, absolutely. It kind of just it is very frantic, and at some points I think this movie should probably have a seizure warning in the beginning, especially when you get to the certain red and blue, specifically red, blue, and white flashing lights towards the end. It is kind of this huge fever dream of a movie.
They didn't know about light sensitivity back then, maybe.
This is before
Porygon. Yeah, this is way before Porygon.
But Obayashi actually shot this film for like 2 months without a storyboard.
No storyboard.
So,
and it kind of feels like a movie without a storyboard, honestly.
It feels like
it's a meandering kind of thing. Like it makes it. There's sequences where, especially like when so many things are happening all at once, that it feels like he probably like made, even during the special effects, like he made the girls like sit there and like wait, like while the special effects people like did all their stuff,
and then he like figured it out on the spot.
Right.
I mean, it sounded like he was given a lot of free reign.
He had a lot of freedom
because even the Toho staff that was working with him, they enjoyed their time working on the film, from what I've researched. But they also agreed that this film is absolutely incomprehensible, and they did not, what it sounds like, have a whole lot of faith in this film being super successful. But they were just there to, do their job, essentially.
Well, and they bundled it. Like, it was originally shown in a double feature with a romantic film.
Which probably is a safe bet.
But it ended up being kind of a hit. People really, really liked it. And it's definitely one of the earliest for me. I think both me and Ryan agree that it's maybe one of the earliest things where we can see a lot of, like, the themes and elements of, like, idol culture.
Yeah. This feels like almost like a blueprint for like early idol anime even. Yeah,
but and also like they're kind of like so there's 7 girls who make up the main cast of the film, and they go to basically end up at a haunted house, and then each one of them gets killed in like some very silly weird way. But each one of them, it's very much feels like a girl group or like a boy band. Where
they each have distinct personalities
but it's based all around a singular characteristic.
Yeah. You know what? Why don't we just go down the list of girls really quick?
Let's go down the list of girls.
So playing Gorgeous was Kimiko Ikegami. Her personality is she's rich and she's pretty. She's complicated because she has daddy and mommy issues. Yeah, her entire personality is that she's just pretty.
Right, and she's constantly like primping herself. Like she'll like constantly have like a compact open and like looking at her reflection while like applying makeup or something.
Right.
It's very she's a material girl for sure.
Yeah. The next girl is Kung Fu, played by Miki Jinbo.
She's my favorite.
Kung Fu's the best. Honestly, Kung Fu's my favorite too.
My favorite.
My favorite.
My favorite.
My favorite.
My favorite.
Kung Fu is awesome. She knows Kung Fu. That's kind of it.
They give her like kung fu fighting sequences where she like flips around on wires
she
and stuff
fights
like that.
a lot. She has like all the fight scenes essentially.
Yeah.
But her
and sometimes she fights like things that are clearly haunted,
and she just like
and then doesn't think anything about it.
Does not care. She's like, well, that was weird. Maybe I just imagined it.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on.
Yeah. Lots of horror movie logic for sure.
She has like, I feel like it's that one like kind of very tomboy kind of characteristic.
For sure.
Like you see a lot.
She's an Allenby
like,
for sure.
Yeah.
She's not a Rain. She's an Allenby for sure.
The next girl is Professor, who's played by Ai Matsubara. Professor's characteristics are she's Velma pretty much.
Well, what I really like about her is she has this dialogue at the end of the movie where she's yelling and complaining about how none of this makes sense. Because she's like a science person. Yeah. She's like
trying to figure out the mystery.
She's like logic and reason, and then like the haunted house that doesn't apply to any of that, and it's like literally like dissolving her in blood water.
Yeah. And she's kind of just losing her mind, but still trying to grasp at like whatever straw.
Although she has like a very literal like Jinkies moment where she loses her glasses,
and then that's what leads to her.
And then she dies because she lost her glasses.
After that, we have Fantasy, played by Kumiko Oba. Fantasy like stories, I guess. In the beginning, she's kind of making a horror film.
Yeah, she's like making her own horror film. She's taking pictures.
The scarier thing is she's I guess she's into their teacher or dating their teacher,
Mr. Togo-san.
Yeah,
who tries to come to their rescue, by the way.
Does he really? Does he really try to come to their rescue, or is he just trying to go hang out?
Smash a 17-year-old? I don't know. Probably the latter.
Yeah. Who's really the villain here?
Probably shouldn't. Even in the 70s, you probably weren't supposed to be banging your students.
Yeah, but Fantasy's personality just kind of boils down to.
But she has fantasy sequences, and they are cool.
Yeah, has a camera too.
Yeah, no, she does have a camera, but like she's like always off in La La Land, right?
Yeah,
like there's this sequence where her and Togo-san are like on a horse together, and it has like titles and of like a romance kind of like period drama. I really like it. They drop that like right in the middle of the movie, like on top of the road.
And there's footage. like the film grain burn or whatever effect where it's like clearly dissolving, or like her fantasy is dissolving back into reality, because she's the one that like kind of loses her mind like the most, I feel, because she's already, I think the implication may be that she's already into this kind of stuff. So like she never really believed in it, and now that it's real, it's kind of just like cracked her brain even more, because then she's taken it the least seriously, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe. She also holds out hope the longest though too, because she's sure that Togo's gonna save her.
Yeah.
And then he does drive around in the wilderness, like where the house is, but he can't come to the house because he wasn't invited or whatever.
Yeah, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
I think the implication is that you have to promise the spirit or the aunt or the cat spirit or yokai Bakeneko thing that possesses the house.
Yeah, there's an evil cat. A lot of the film revolves around an evil cat named Shiro, named White.
In the subtitles it says Blanc, which is, is that
also white?
It's also white. Is it French or German? Oh wait, no.
It's French.
German is Weiss, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. I kept reading it.
Weiss Schwarz was literally black and white.
I kept reading it as Blanche, from like Blanche from Golden Girls.
They would have had a better time if they had been going to visit Blanche. They would have had a really sweet time with Oba-chan.
After Fantasy, then there's Mac. Mac is done dirty for no reason.
Yeah, they just dunk on her. She pretty much seems to exist as like the friend that they call fat all the time.
Yeah, Mac is played by Mieko Sato.
By the way, who is not fat.
She's not fat at all. She's like as skinny as the other girls, and
She's literally the exact same size as all the other girls, but has like a slightly rounder face.
yeah, that's it. And she's always eating. That's like
her characteristic. She's like, oh, I'm really hungry, guys.
Yeah, and then like she brings a watermelon, and then Kung Fu goes, "Wow, that watermelon is as big as you," and I'm like, "That's just rude." Are you actually?
It's a huge watermelon too. Friends? It's a huge watermelon. Yeah, they're kind of they're mean girls for sure. At least to Mac.
Mac is also unfortunately the first to go. She gets dismembered like immediately.
She gets turned into a watermelon, and then they eat her.
And then they eat her. But after Mac, we got Melody. Melody is played by Eriko Tanaka, and Melody's entire personality, she likes music.
Yeah, she plays guitar, she plays piano.
I think that's it. That's all you really see her play, but that's her whole shtick. That's kind of all of these girls are unfortunately
they're all shtick.
Bit one note in their shticks.
Oh, absolutely. There's 7 of them, and their shtick usually boils down to like how they get killed too.
Yeah. So. Melody probably has the best death of them all. She gets consumed by the piano, and they do this really cool like blue screen effect where they like paint her fingers like getting like, munched up by the piano.
By the piano. Yeah. And then eventually her whole body's getting eaten by the piano.
Yeah, and then like she goes into this like hell dimension, all dismembered, and then she starts commenting on her own body being consumed by the piano. It's very interesting. It's a very psychedelic kind of sequence.
There's one interesting thing too, where there's a bunch of sequences where characters are like commenting on a sequence as it's happening, like the flashback sequence. So like Gorgeous's aunt, like the reason she's like this like evil old hag is because she's like waiting for her like love to come,
dead fiance.
Yeah. To like come back and like. From World War II.
I have written in my notes that aunt's dead fiance.
Yeah, I don't remember his name.
He's played by Tomokazu Miura. I think he's also another like commercial model. He's in high school.
And she's an adult when this happens. And he goes away to World War II and dies in a horrible like dogfighting accident or whatever.
And she's waiting for him forever.
It's not an accident,
guess.
But yeah, she waits, and it's weird though because it's implied that her and her sister were really close. But it's like, when was that?
When she started dating. I think it was whatever the implication was, is that they were really, or maybe what the aunt is the aunt even really real? Or maybe the aunt was just Blanche the whole time?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the aunt is just the evil cat.
Yeah.
A figment of the evil cat's machinations.
The last girl, we kind of forgot, which is kind of sweet, who's played by Masayo Miyako.
She's like the trad wife.
Yeah, that's her entire character.
She likes to clean. She says things like, "I like to clean."
Yeah, and she gets eaten alive by mattresses.
Yeah, she gets eaten by futons.
So,
and then when they find her clothes. And they sniff her panties.
Oh my god, yeah, that was just a strange thing. That was just weird, honestly.
The whole movie is like walking the line between like, it's really funny because the girls all act so innocent, and the movie doesn't really get like real oogly with them, but it does do a lot of like really like suggestive stuff. Like there's a bunch of nudity, but it's like not particularly sexualized nudity, but it's still like kind of constant.
Yeah,
I don't know. I know a lot of Westerners, like the first complaint I see when I look up this movie online is that there's like a bunch of nudity with women who would definitely by Western conventions be considered underage. But in the 70s in Japan, I don't know who's to say. But a lot of Westerners are like really turned off by this movie on that alone. And supposedly some of the girls weren't comfortable with it either. And so then like the older woman like got naked with one of them on set, and then they wrote in a nude scene for her to have too,
which is great.
None of the nudity in this movie is called for necessarily by the subject matter.
Yeah, it is a bit,
but it is there. I don't know. I wonder if in 1977 that like made it feel like extra exciting or cheeky. What if the audience really engaged with it? Like, was that a part of its success? I have no idea.
Well, it's 77, so I feel like, is that the height of exploitation filmmaking at that point?
There's certainly a lot of that at the time.
But yeah, so the I think it's a good point to mention that this film does look interesting. It has a weird kind of
It has its own visual language for sure. It's like a
lighting is very soft,
yeah.
and it loves to use matte paintings in the background,
Mm.
and the music is very, very present in the film and the mood that you're supposed to be feeling. Especially with characters like Kung Fu, who has her own theme that starts to play when she has an action scene, and they'll overcrank or undercrank the camera to like make the action more exciting, give her
Mhm.
slow mo, make her do some crazy flips, move at super speed or whatever. Um,
Well, and then melody like literally plays like a melody that
yeah,
is kind of a leitmotif throughout the whole movie too. Like so the music is, and there's a band called Godaigo that is like has like an appearance in the film, and then has like a song at the end of the movie too. So music is like a big part of the movie. It's not quite a musical, but it's certainly very central.
so
But there's a lot of there's a lot of two-dimensional materials made visually. There's like these matte paintings that are a huge part of it. There's animation, like there's a lot of animation in the movie, like a lot of transitions and like visual, like kind of graphical scenes that like involve like some kind of animation. And the animation itself is like really stylish and cool. And there's a painting. There's an evil painting of the cat they have to destroy,
yeah.
and then it keeps puking blood forever until they all drown. So it's like there's a lot. There's a lot going on. It's a lot to look at, and it is gorgeous.
This was, I think it's a good time to also mention that it was shot on one of Toho's largest sound stages,
Yeah.
which I believe it.
Yeah.
I think they use everything from matte paintings to elaborate set design to miniatures to a pool to even I think a minimal location shooting, but it does seem like it's like location and then they insert that shot into a matte background.
Right.
Because a lot of the environments just seem way too controlled in order for it to be like considered natural. And I think a lot of the location shots are even then with Mr. Togo, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, because he's on like this weird road trip that's kind of like a
He's
C
on-
plot line.
he's on a trip to go bang a high school girl, which is very questionable alone. And honestly, he gets what he deserves by the end.
Does he die?
Yeah, he gets turned into bananas.
He gets turned into bananas.
Yeah,
I missed that part. I remember him like fainting. It seemed like he was upset about the bananas. He's like, "Oh, bananas," and then he just like he closes his eyes.
Right, and then he passes out, and
Then there's bananas there.
Gorgeous's new stepmom shows up,
Uh-huh.
and she looks into the car, and then it's just his hat
And with a bunch of bananas.
in a
Okay,
in
that's
a pile of
hilarious.
bananas,
That's fucking hilarious.
which
He meets like a weird melon man spirit that like lives in the forest around where this house is. And yeah, it gets turned into bananas.
which I think it's a good time to mention the catalyst for the story. So Gorgeous has mommy and daddy issues because she looks just like her mom, and her mom died when she was very young. And it seems like it's just been her and her dad this entire time. Her dad is played by Saho Sasazawa, or no, Saho Sasazawa. I think that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I can correct myself in post. I think his name is literally just father. I don't think he has
All the characters have these like one note names.
they're very very obvious about what they're about, what their characters are about.
Well, it's
I
funny
guess.
because the stepmom has a real name.
Yeah, Ryoko Emma, who's played by Haruko Wanibuchi, who's for some reason I thought she was foreign or at least implied to be a foreigner, but I think she's just Japanese. But it's implied that
I couldn't even find like a Wikipedia page for her, so
I think everyone in this movie is just from commercial acting and
Right.
really doesn't have that extensive of
one maybe they got into it after this, but certainly not before this.
yeah. So her dad met Emma while working
abroad. Yeah, he comes back from working with Sergio Leone, the famed Italian filmmaker, who told him that his music, because he's a composer, was better than that of Ennio Morricone.
Which shots fired, I guess. And Gorgeous does not take this very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes to digging through I think her mom's old stuff, Xing out photos of her dad. And she finds a postcard from her aunt. And her aunt is played by Yoko Minamida, who's either she's just a ghost or a witch or again like a
Yeah,
yokai
she's
talking
definitely
to a
not
cat
like
spirit.
actually her aunt, I don't think.
And
But she starts a written correspondence with
right,
with her aunt, and her aunt invites her and her friends to come to the house for the summer. Originally,
oh
they had
shoot,
all had different plans for the summer,
yeah,
and then they like she like Gorgeous was gonna hang out with her dad, right? But now she's mad at her dad. She doesn't want to hang out with
right.
him, and all the other girls were gonna go to this camp, and the camp gets canceled. Mr. Togo tells them that it's canceled for something. And so they all decide to go to her aunt's house, and it's like very cute and very fun, and like has a lot of like spirit of adventure and like charming whimsy to it. And they all get eaten by the house.
One by one, they all get
Yeah,
trapped in this hell dimension, dismembered or sent whole.
yeah. Obayashi's daughter came up with all these different ways, and it's like almost all of them have made it into the movie. Like I think there's only a couple ways that girls die that didn't seem to have been come up with by his daughter. So like the watermelon thing where she gets turned into watermelon, and the watermelon like a head gets dragged up from the well. That was his daughter's thing. The getting eaten by mattresses was there's getting eaten by a piano. Like all those things are things that a 12-year-old girl came up with, which I think is really fun.
I think what the better parts of this film are actually some of the effects, but then also those same effects are some of the worst and distracting parts of the film as well. Like you mentioned the watermelon or the well scene with her decapitated head. Like that is a really really bad and really obvious blue screen effect. But then we have better use of blue screens and blue paint throughout the rest of the film. And even then, all of it is practical. They don't have access to a whole lot of like anything digital really.
Supposedly, there's a couple tape effects that are amongst like the earliest in Japanese cinema. I think that the one with like the body getting dissolved in the blood pool
Oh yeah,
is
so
supposedly like a tape effect.
I think that one is when they pour like blue paint on her, so that when they expose the negative to blue paint, it dissolves or
Yeah,
it appears to dissolve or something
right.
like that. It's like an interesting like uh in camera and post production effect that they have to do, and I don't I think that was one of the effects that Obayashi wasn't necessarily sure how it would turn out until
Until
after.
they just did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until he just did it and then
I
saw
think
it
he
in
was
post
really
production.
comfortable though with some of the effects, or maybe all of the effects. Many of
Yeah,
the effects coming off as very amateurish
right.
because it was part of like this very tongue-in-cheek kind of style that he was playing with. And it works. I mean, it really does
It
work.
definitely feels like an auteur film in that kind of sense. And Obayashi, I think, has like an extensive kind of background in special effects work through his like background
Commercial
working
work,
in
yeah.
commercials, which probably at the time him being able to do that is is probably like a crazy thing to put on his resume. Because some of the effects that he's able to achieve practically are like really really interesting and really eye catchy, and I can totally see the um the like the weird kind of Japanese commercially vibes from like YouTube compilation videos from the early 2000s, if that kind of makes sense. Like the long man.
Yeah.
Um it feels like some of those like eye catchy or weird aspects are definitely in Obayashi's style.
It has like like the whole movie is kind of like excitedly zany
Yeah.
and kind of silly and absurd, and it has like a playful visual style that's very very unique, but kind of iconic too. It's like it feels, like he was talking about, at least when I was researching him, he was talking a lot about trying to come up with a like the horror movie is kind of like a Western like
Concept.
concept, right? But they're trying to do it in like a Japanese and essentially a quintessentially Japanese style, and so they're dealing with Japanese themes, the Japanese visual language, and I think that they very much do that, right? And I think it looks like, I mean, obviously, like the movie like looks really really good. It's a feast for the eyes, and it has like a lot of, it's clearly been like very influential too. They actually, Toho, like a little more than 10 years later, made Sweet Home, and Sweet Home is another kind of haunted house kind of movie, and there was a video game that came out with it, which is like the first survival horror video game of all time. So in a weird way, this movie is actually like an ancestor of Resident Evil and Silent Hill and all that kind of good stuff.
It definitely falls into that weird kind of category of Japanese like horror that you're just not supposed to be able to comprehend or understand. Like I'm trying to think of those like weird Konami shooters where you're just like a flying head and then you're like firing off against like an army of yokai or something. The name is like at the tip of my tongue. It might be uh eh, I don't know, but like the whole like use compared it to like Clockwork at sometimes, which it does kind of have that.
Was that Zombie Nation?
I'm
trying to think.
I don't
Sorry, when you start talking about old shmups, I'm like, I think I can remember what this is. I'll remember what it is. But it has like a zaniness, like honestly, some of the zaniness does remind me of like weird Japanese video games too. Like it reminds me of Choniki, right? Choniki is like a shmup with like full of like naked flexing guys. You know what I mean? Just like weird zany and like lots of heads. Yeah, just lots of severed heads. And like this has a lot of floating heads, you know. That kind of zany visual language is like definitely fun and it, you know, it's a lot more lighthearted than like some of like, you know, Japanese horror movies can be like really, really dark and despondent, and like this movie isn't really that
I mean, like no one survives, but even then,
but the movie doesn't care.
And you don't feel like you should care either. There's not like a whole lot of investment in these girls.
Yeah, because they're like totally like commodified.
Yeah, unfortunately. They're very one note, honestly.
Yeah.
Which I take it as, depending on how you interpret it, I think you can like, if you look at it deeper, you can be like, oh, maybe this is a proto indictment of horror culture and horror cinema and the reduction that it holds in with women in because it's supposed.
I doubt that, but I do think it's really interesting. Some people have pointed out. Some people have tried to point out that that the evil spirits are like the ghosts of like World War II haunting people who have no memory of that.
That's interesting. Honestly, I haven't really thought about that, but that kind of does make sense because I did read somewhere that Obayashi wanted to tie in some aspects of World War II because he is I think his family was like affected, or that was
yeah. So there's something about like I think he survived like Hiroshima or something like that.
Honestly, that makes a lot more sense of him tying it back.
I think he survived Hiroshima, and like this, like I think all of his childhood friends like died in the bomb, and
you know, that honestly, that for like, 77, that makes a whole lot of sense because then like a lot of these children that survived Hiroshima or remember Hiroshima would have been entering like their
adulthood and
their creative careers would have been years, in full swing. Like I feel like Anno is another example where he like continues to draw upon aspects of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki and like the aftermath.
But Anno's a lot younger than that, I think.
Was he at this? Oh yeah, Anno would have been like what, 29, 33?
What year is Anno born? Anno. Here, think about it this way: a bunch of college friends founded Gynex in the 80s, so he's way too young to have memories of World War II.
Okay. How about Tezuka?
Probably, but like, and then just in general, like, I mean, Japan is like a place with that's like cursed with lots of World War II kind of memories,
the
right?
ghosts of the imperialist,
right?
And moving on.
No, but supposedly there's elements of that, and like, you know, this is a story about a group of friends who all get killed, right? So like,
I think that's an interesting read. It kind of, I can see how it works like that way because there's such a heavy reliance on like the World War II kind of.
Well, and the movie also has like this kind of like heavily romantic element about it too, where like there's like the whole thing is like very kind of like.
Yeah, the romanticization of like serving or being an honorable act of some sort and being a soldier being kind of cool.
Maybe. I mean, not just that. I meant like the Natsu Yasumi thing about it. You know what I mean? So like this whole movie takes place during summer break.
Yeah.
And it has this like the opening, especially segments of the movie have these very kind of nostalgic, presently nostalgic, like Natsukashi kind of wistful kind of feeling about summer vacation, about being with your friends, and about being with like these sweet kind of naive young kind of point of your life.
Yeah, this is the like for anyone who has watched a slice of life anime, like, or even
the opening is very like that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is shot like a music video, kind of, where it's like kind of cutting from transition to transition, and then like there's this the group shots and everything. But
the images of them at school are very idyllic. The
Yeah.
images of them traveling are very idyllic. The images of summer vacation
Yeah.
are very, very idyllic and romantic in a very like now is romance kind
the
of way.
entire movie itself feels like that beach filler arc
Absolutely.
in any anime,
Or
that
just
you've seen.
anytime-
you go to like a vacation on like your rich friend's private island.
Exactly.
Like for some reason that is in the friend group.
Right,
They have
right,
a
right.
private house on a private island or whatever.
Or in every persona, there's always like a part where like, oh, we're going to Hawaii.
Yeah,
Oh, we're
'cause there's
going
always
to
a rich friend in
Yeah,
in every persona.
yeah. Or they're like, oh, we're going to a ryokan. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's always like a vacation arc. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's kind of like a side quest.
Well, because you got to see them in the swimsuits, right?
This movie does that, but this movie takes it to another level. So
And like the quirkiness of it all, like that one character, Watermelon Farmer, I think that's his literal name, played by Ase Kobayashi.
turns out he's a ghost.
Turns out he's a ghost too.
Turns out they're all ghosts.
Turns out they're all dead. He turns into a skeleton when Mr. Togo shows up. Finally, after
Because he tells him that he doesn't like watermelon, he likes bananas.
banana. Mr. Togo went on this entire adventure just to go hang out with some high schoolers, and he gets turned into bananas, and that's what he deserves.
That's what he deserves.
Uh,
What's really funny though is none of the girls are concerned about that part of the story whatsoever.
It's just something
Like the
that
movie is not
happening.
concerned with the fact that like this is that Fantasy is dating her high school teacher.
Yeah, and a lot of the
Yeah, I
comedic
think
elements
don't
are,
they talk about something about it to their other teacher, their other female teacher? Because she
Right.
doesn't seem concerned about it either.
right. I mean,
No one is concerned. In 1977 in Japan, no one is concerned about the high school teacher dating a 17-year-old.
which major red flags there. I don't think anyone needs to hear that.
It's a culture history lesson, Times
Never again.
times change, people change, cultures be different. People have a hard time coming to terms with that these days. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they'll look at something that happened in 1996 and they're like, these monsters. It's just like, well, or maybe culture changes and values shift dramatically, like rapidly, like year in, year out, decade in, decade out.
I mean,
I don't know. Here's the thing. Maybe people in Japan were incensed by this in 1977. I highly doubt it. That's my instinct.
but where were we?
I have no idea.
Mr. Togo. Oh, and the watermelon guy. He's such like a weird, like kind of one-off, kind of weird Scooby-Doo character that you meet that is totally the red herring for the entire mystery. and,
Yeah,
like,
you
just
think he's going to be behind
He has
it.
nothing to do with the story actually, or
There is we mentioned while we were watching it that there's like an element of it that just feels kind of Scooby-Dooey in general.
right.
There are
This does
there's
feel
Scooby
like
vibes for
there
sure.
are definitely Scooby-Doo vibes. This
Yeah.
whole group feels like the mystery gang to
Yeah.
an extent, where they're all very one-notey characters.
Yeah, exactly. Like
fulfilling,
I'm hungry. Like let's make a sandwich. Like my glasses.
Jinkies.
Yeah, exactly.
Zoinks.
Zoinks.
Fuck.
Yeah. Except they all die in the end, and
Yeah.
and the movie doesn't care.
Yeah. Well, does Gorgeous die, or is Gorgeous just possessed?
I don't.
Does that count as death?
She's definitely not good.
Yeah.
She's not all right.
So at some point through the movie, when they get to the house, they meet the aunt, and she's in this wheelchair, and she's all old. Clearly it's just makeup, because this lady is just like clearly just like in her 30s. And after Mac dies, she's able to like dance around and walk around, and they're like, "I thought you were stuck in a wheelchair." And she's like, "Oh, I just needed to rest."
Mhm.
No one asks any other questions after that, and subsequently, as each girl disappears, she gets more youthful and younger and more powerful.
And what's interesting about that is you also see in the earlier segments of the movie that the actress that plays Gorgeous also plays her mother.
Yeah.
So there's like this kind of familial connection, this youthful connection. There's like they're meant to look alike.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah. As the house eats more people,
Right.
she gets more youthful. But then she hides in the refrigerator and we don't see her again ever, pretty much.
no, she pretends to hide in the refrigerator, and then she jumps up into the rafters, but she's like shrunken down. It's weird. I'm not gonna think too hard about it. She just distracts the other girls playing haunted house while she goes upstairs to mess with Gorgeous and then possess her body through the reflection, which she does. And then I think Gorgeous
Yeah, of course, Gorgeous's downfall is that she's like hanging out in the mirror too long.
Yeah. putting on like makeup to make herself look like her mom.
She's like getting dressed up old timey. Like there's definitely like a traditional like Japanese cultural element because she's like getting dressed up in very traditional like old school. Like she looks like a geisha.
Well, now that you mention it again, like when we had the flashback to World War II about the backstory about the aunt's like dead fiance and stuff like that. One, it's interesting because the girls react to the flashback as if they're visually,
as if they're watching it, as
like,
if they're as if they're on like a panel.
YouTubers watching the flashback with us.
Totally.
But there's this idealized kind of element to it all.
The movie's so like fluid with the narrative and with like the
right.
It's very fluid. Like
it doesn't feel like it's breaking like the pace up at all. It doesn't feel like anything is like slowing down.
But it'll do things like that where they're giving narration to a visual that you're seeing as if they're also seeing it, and then it'll also jump into like fantasies, like actual fantasy sequences with no notice to. It's like very fluid.
Or like kung fu's action scenes kind of just coming out of nowhere.
Exactly. The movie's super fluid with all these things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is again back to the music if we could talk about that for a second. So the music was actually produced by another frequent collaborator of Obayashi, Ase Kobayashi, who is a music producer for commercials that he and Obayashi had worked on together. He provides the pianos for like the main house theme. And Obayashi wanted, I think, specifically a youthful kind of sound, so they tapped Miki Yoshino and his band Godaigo for that for I think the song at the end, but also to contribute overall to the album.
And then they show up in the film too.
Which the film's original soundtrack was actually created, produced, and released before the film was made.
Another thing that
so he was clearly plotting.
He was enterprising.
Yeah, he was really enterprising this thing.
He's like I'm gonna make them see that I should do this. We got a score already. We got a radio drama. Like it's happening whether they want it to or not.
Yeah, and then they had singer Ken Narita, who was very famous at the time for contributing vocals for Sentai openings and Cyborg 009 to provide the one of the tracks of the motion picture soundtrack, which honestly we should probably just go over songs because I think those are just interesting in themselves. So the first one, it's a 12-track soundtrack, and the first one is House Main Theme. Then you got Buggy Boogie, which I think is the theme for Mr. Togo because he's in the dune buggy or whatever.
So Mr. Togo, his character quirk is that he has a weird car.
Yeah, and it has its own theme that like plays whenever he drives it around.
And like the weird C plot line of him traveling to meet up with Fantasy involves like a bunch of sequences where he ends up in random places. Like at one point in time, he's at a ramen shop where the ramen chef is a bear.
Right.
And there's another part where he's stuck in traffic surrounded by those giant neon lit like 18-wheelers.
His adventure itself just feels referential to Japanese culture. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. At the ramen shop, it's supposedly supposed to be a reference to the Tora-san films, which I don't know if we're ever going to talk about on this pod, but it's like a series of like 50 movies from like all the way back to in Showa about this like this kind of like wandering guy who's like unlucky in love.
Like the Western equivalent would probably be like if you're making movies in the 70s and you keep making references to like Charlie Chaplin or like
I don't think it goes back that far, but it's definitely like it's from like the 40s and 50s.
Okay, so not that far. Then Groucho Marx.
I don't know, but like we've never. I can't think of a film series with 50 installments in the West. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also true.
Like, can you think of any movies? Like,
no.
007 doesn't have 50 movies.
Yeah, and that's not even really a Western production. It's like a Western British co-production, isn't it? Technically.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd say that England is the West, but I'm just saying that, like, in general, maybe I don't know. Maybe in Europe they have like a film series that goes 50 deep.
Honestly,
but we don't in America.
I think most of the longest running film franchises are coming out of Japan because you have Zatoichi, which I think is also in like the double digits, like past 20 or something like that. You have Godzilla, which is also like past 20 something, and then you have. What is it? What you mentioned, the Tora series?
Yeah, Tora-san.
Which is like into the 50s?
Yeah, there's like 48 of them.
So maybe it is kind of unique to Japan.
Maybe it's a unique thing of Japan to like make a billion sequels to a single franchise.
Maybe Japan had the film industry figured out a lot earlier. This was the
dark.
secret the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Now we'll never stop getting Marvel movies.
But back to the soundtrack, we have Hungry House Blues, and then number 4, Eat. Number 5, Sweet Dreams of Days Gone By. And then we have A Letter in the Past. Cherries Were Made for Eating. And then Eat, Eat. Then we have In the Evening Mist. My favorite track, unfortunately, Oriental Melon Man.
Oriental Melon Man.
This is the theme for the Melon Man. It's just so funky. It's so funky. Honestly, this entire movie soundtrack slaps. This movie soundtrack goes hard. But why did they gotta call the funky?
What I like about it though is the
Oriental Melon Man. After that, we have Eat, Eat, Eat. And lastly, we have the House Love Theme featuring Ken Narita. So that's like the vocalized version.
Yeah.
which
actually that's like a pretty common thing in Japanese movies, for there to be like a like vocals all of a sudden to a song that you've heard earlier in the movie at the end. Like the titles kind of roll on, you finally get to hear like the vocals to the song. But the music is quite good. What I like about it is its wistful charm, and it's like kind of like there's a sadness to, like, I don't know, it's weird. So there's this group of 17-year-old girls who get eaten alive by an evil house, and there's an element to the music, especially at the end, where it sounds almost like kind of like graduation music, like high school graduation.
Like
music.
They're all saying goodbye.
Yeah.
There is definitely this melancholic kind of innocent vibe.
But I know, but it's not dark. It's so weird.
Yeah. But it is a bit ominous.
Yeah,
I would say it's not like overtly like.
I almost feel like the tone, like, what's freaky about the tone is its duality. It's like bright, cheery silliness and the kind of
honestly,
gruesome.
I feel like the tone
elements.
shifts, because if you go into this movie blind, which I think some people, if you haven't, I guess at this point, if you're watching this still, go watch it right now or whatever. But if you go into this film blind, I feel like you experiencing the movie, there's a definite like associative tonal shift you feel with the song or the main house theme, or like it starts off as this like kind of innocent, lighthearted kind of motif, and then because of its association with gruesome things that go on in the film, and then how it plays out in the end, and like how it plays again, it has a much more darker association or much darker connotation in itself. So then you feel this ominousness or this like horrorness to it. I don't know. That's kind of the vibe I got. It's like Coraline, in like kind of that feeling where Coraline feels like on the surface like this kids friendly movie or whatever, but really deep down it's a genuine horror film or whatever.
I just think this movie just is so glib with the stakes. You know what I mean? Like Coraline treats Coraline like this beautiful, precious little person. And this movie treats the girls like
there's more emotional depth with Coraline.
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to make the comparison was more of like the surface level kind of comparative aspects, where it's like Coraline is because it's stop motion and it's based on Neil Gaiman's. I think it's a young adult novel, but I think it's also marketed as a children's book, depending on where you are. So like it has this like associated, because like my parents thought it was a kids movie and they sent me and my sister to go see it, and then we came out.
Well, like, in general, like if it's animated, people just assume it's a kids movie in the West,
right? But then like Coraline itself is actually a kind of straight up a horror movie. Where in House's case, like the music,
Coraline is pretty scary. This
feels innocent, feels not like feels unassuming, doesn't feel like a horror movie at all, really, and then turns into the theme of a horror movie,
right?
I think the film definitely grows into itself. Like, as it goes on.
Well, it's funny too, because the house literally grows too. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like the house is like growing out of control. Like honestly, it's starting to like
all of the multimedia elements and multimedia effects that are in the film. I thought were the coolest aspects of it all, and like
they're definitely the iconic, I think, images of.
And I would love to see it be recreated practically again. I know it would be incredibly expensive to do all that stuff, but just to see it with like the modern,
labor intensive,
labor intensive. But
because they made a lot. I mean, this is like a craftsman kind of movie.
Yeah.
And there's like, it's funny because it's like hard to make, effects look bad. It's hard to make them look cheesy, to a certain extent, because you still have to make all of this stuff. And they had to make this they had to make a puking painting, and they had to like make these animations and like all this different stuff. I mean, like the movie's full of like props and stuff, and like the house is like, I don't know, it's like there's a lot that went into like making it look the way that it does, and like achieving this kind of like Jodorowsky kind of like Baroque beautiful horror kind of pastiche it was certainly a labor of love.
Well, it had to be. there's no way anyone else. I don't
Well,
think
and
anyone else could have
the
directed
guy
this
made
film.
the guy made a score and a radio drama and a bunch of commercial tie-ins. I mean, he was clearly like very obsessed
This
with
was like
making
his
this
passion.
happen.
I feel like
Yeah.
his, and like I've seen like a couple clips from I think the documentary that was like repackaged with it after like it was put into
With the Criterion, yeah, the Criterion thing.
and he was just like talking about how he was making kind of set out to make this kind of counterculture anti-film almost, because he really looked up to filmmakers of his time like Kurosawa and Kobayashi, but he didn't want to make those traditional kind of films or films that fit into those traditional frameworks. He wanted to
You mean like Ozu or something? You said Kobayashi twice. What do you? He looked up to Kurosawa and who?
I think he said Kobayashi. I could be wrong.
There's another Kobayashi that he looked up to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. It's probably somebody I'm not thinking of. Or
Misaki Kobayashi.
Okay.
I think that's like a Harakiri, and then like
the guy who made Katakiri. See, that helps me. Thank you. Okay. I did not know off the top of my head who directed Harakiri.
God, he directed he's one of those directors that directed like the same film like 9 or 10 times.
Sure. And this is a kind of anti-movie. There is like an anti-movie aspect to it where it kind of pretends to have a plot and then doesn't, and then it pretends to like care about these things and then doesn't, and then it pretends to do all these things and then kind of doesn't really do them, and it just does whatever the hell it wants. And I enjoy that. I think that there's a fun silliness to that, and there's a blithe kind of like absurdity to all of human existence, and this movie kind of just plays with that, right? But
I will definitely say this movie, despite being a horror movie, it isn't really scary at all.
No, and it's a horror movie that if anyone is concerned about watching this because it's a horror movie, no, it's not scary. It's silly. It's absurd.
Yeah, I feel like this is a horror movie for people that don't like horror movies. Would absolutely love this movie.
Totally. I feel like it's Scream was always like that for a lot of people. This movie's kind of like got that kind of element where it's more like the flavorful kind of bits of horror without any of like the attempts to really disgust and revile you.
Right. It's so kind of safe almost in the way it's manufactured and then set up and staged and everything. Everything feels so so controlled
and inconsequential.
Yeah. I don't know how else to put it, because like in movies like with Scream, which I think this is an interesting comparison to make, it's set out to be kind of this what is it, a critique of the slasher genre, let's just say. Whereas House, I don't think it's necessarily trying to critique like the haunted house genre or like Western horror or Japanese horror. I think it's just trying to take those elements and like just invert it almost.
Yeah, play like jazz with them.
Yeah, which I don't know, it's really cool. I think this is one of the most interesting and like or visually stimulating and interesting films that you can like really watch. You mentioned like this was one of those films that you feel was like in the background at parties.
Yeah, I think like I was at a party in Woodbridge, like maybe in like 2011 or something, and this was on a TV somewhere. Maybe at Halloween, who knows?
Who knows? But
it definitely it's a background party kind of movie, in that it's like very like you could definitely like look over at any given moment and be like, oh, what the hell? What's this? Yeah,
this is cool. Then you get distracted for a little bit, and then you return to your whatever conversation.
Regularly scheduled, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Which I definitely can see this being one of those films that flew under the radar in like the VHS railroad era, where it's just people, talked about it and no one really believed that it ever existed, and then everyone doubted.
Yeah, this is definitely like a weird like foreign side of the VHS rental shop kind of movie for sure. And I'm gonna for sure reach out to like some of my friends in Japan and like ask them like if they've ever heard anybody mention this movie or if they care about it or what they think about it, because I'm curious to see what the cultural, because I actually have a pretty good idea of what the culture is around this film in the West. This has become like a niche kind of like
cult classic.
Yes.
Honestly,
this is something.
At this point,
this is a movie much like Jodorowsky actually. That's kind of like cool to like in the West.
I think at this point it's more popular, or it's definitely safe to say it is more popular in the West. And
I'm assuming, but I don't actually know for sure.
That's also true. That is assumption. But from what I can tell is I've met a lot of Western cinema fans that like really like this movie.
Supposedly when it came out, when it was re-released in like 2009 or whatever, there were like showings were sold out.
Makes sense.
So I mean,
how limited of a screening was it then?
probably not a lot, but still.
In any case, I feel like Blade Runner in almost in that sense, where it's like, it was
actually, you know
unpopular.
what? I actually saw when I was doing a little research. I actually saw what its box office was in the U.S. in Canada,
Really?
and it was made $200,000.
Oh my god!
So it's not bad. It's not like a lot, but it's not bad.
It's not bad,
especially for a movie that's coming out 40 years later. You know what I mean? Like, not bad.
So I guess the Blade Runner comparison I'm making is the sense that, like, when it came out, critically panned, didn't necessarily do too well commercially. I guess that's not the same as House, but over time it grew a cult following, and then at this point, almost I think more people have seen Blade Runner than haven't seen Blade Runner in the past. I think the same case you can make for House, where it's like at this point more people have seen House or have heard of House because of word of mouth and popularity, and like the popularity within that film subculture that it's become
it's a cinephile movie for
popular
sure.
culture
Yeah,
to an extent.
for sure.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking about it too much. Maybe that's just
No, I think you're right. I think it's definitely, at least I mean, especially over here, it's definitely more popular today than it was 10 years ago or even 10 years before that. So
Is there any kind of film you would compare this film to?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because, it has certain elements and certain vibes that are like not far off from like other kind of like supernatural Japanese horror, kind of fare. There's like a lot of there's like weird stuff with hair.
Yeah.
Japanese horror movies, especially haunted stuff, always has weird stuff with hair.
Well, I feel like this is so rooted in also like the Shinto yokai kind of vibes, if that makes sense, where it's a cat spirit, and the hair thing, which I think is also another yokai that shows up in Shinto mythology and stuff like that, which
but like I can't think of like every creepy like haunted like supernatural theme, because Japan has other kinds of horror movies too,
right.
But obviously the supernatural horror I think is like kind of like the iconic kind of Japanese horror film, and there's always weird stuff with the hair in the drain,
right.
Hair and coming up somewhere, hair in the food. There's always some weird stuff with hair, and this movie, like she's in the tub and like the hair starts crawling up her body,
and then it like recedes back into the water.
There's like always some weird hair thing, whether it's like Ringu or Grudge. There's always some weird
Someone's
hair
vomiting
shit.
up hair.
Exactly. There's always some weird hair thing.
I mean, maybe it's just like, is it like one of those phobias?
Like tryptophobia or something like that.
Is tryptophobia?
No.
real?
Tryptophobia is the one with like the small holes.
Small holes, right?
Yeah, but I'm sure there's a one with hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't like hair. Like,
do you still not like hair? Like if you see hair in the drain, like if you were to get into like a shower at a hotel and you saw hair in the drain, you'd be like,
now that you mention it, yeah, I do actually. Yes, very much so. I do not like hair. I mean, like I try to like clean the hair out every time I see it. But yeah, no, I don't. Dang, maybe. Whoa,
new phobia unlocked.
Whoa,
Ryan's freaked out by hair.
I guess so.
So how would you rate this film, Ryan? Is this a perfect movie?
No, I don't think this is
not a perfect movie. It's a really good movie.
It's a really good movie,
but it's not a perfect movie.
This is a movie I think, if you ever feel like you should give up on filmmaking, watch this movie, and then you'll know you should never give up. Because then, this is clearly an example of anything is really possible in the realm of filmmaking.
I would actually agree with that. I think there's a really helpful lesson in that. I think that's metatextual. You wouldn't learn that just from watching the movie. But that being said, I think that Kobayashi's persistence certainly brought about something that just simply wouldn't exist otherwise, and it's like totally iconic. I mean, it's an iconic film, so
not just
iconic image.
It's very admirable too.
Yeah,
of a goal to just keep working on an auteur like project.
Just based on the whimsical fears of his daughter.
Yeah,
like getting smothered by futons.
Which, there are so many interesting deaths in the film too.
Do you have a favorite?
Kung Fu's death.
That's your favorite, because that was my least favorite.
So,
she's my favorite character, and I think she gets the worst death.
Yeah, she kind of does get like done really, really dirty. But the reason why it's my favorite death is because like when she's getting consumed by the chandelier or whatever.
Yeah, she's getting eaten by a chandelier. She's getting electrocuted, and she's like trying to fight it, but she can't because it's eating her head.
Yeah, and she fires off one last kick, and her like lower torso breaks off, and then that's what attacks Blanche's.
The painting. Yeah, that destroys the painting. Is her torso rips in half, and then it like high flying kick rips in half the painting of the cat, and then the house starts to like fall apart because the cat.
Other than that, I really like Melodies, because Melodies was like very ironic in the sense that she was playing the piano, and then her fingers started getting eaten by the piano. And then
she even makes a comment, I think, earlier in the film about how it felt like the keys of the piano were trying to eat her.
That's probably the only like really set up kind of comeuppance death I feel like that's in the film, anyways. Because then what's sweet is she gets consumed by the mattresses, and it's really cool how it's shot from underneath.
Yeah, like they show it with glass clearly.
Yeah.
They like replace the floor with glass and then show her getting like basically slammed by all the mattresses,
right?
Like from below her.
And then she just disappears, and the next time we see her, she's in like a clock, like she's all dismembered inside a clock, which I thought that was a really cool effect. But the other effects were just like Mac being the blue screen effects on Mac's body.
Yeah, pretty bad. But they're kind of charmingly bad, because like what it demonstrates in that moment is the movie doesn't care.
Right. I can see that.
Movie doesn't give a shit. Movie's confident. It's a confidence, a lot of confidence to show off bad special effects, especially when they're not good, and you're just like, nope, that's what it is.
I think
it's a movie with a lot of confidence.
Definitely, it feels like a film from a veteran effects director. If this feels like a bunch of effects reels for like the 70s or whatever.
Well, supposedly they were even using effects in this that they couldn't use or wouldn't use in the Godzilla movies. Like it was beyond the Godzilla film kind of like repertoire. So it was like some of the same people, some of the same effects team people.
I wonder
if
that's
they were
like,
doing stuff that wasn't actually in there.
That was like in one of the shots. I don't know if you recall, where it's like an aerial shot of the mansion, and like you could see the characters walking around. I think that was a miniature, and they inserted shots from them walking around like on the set.
That makes sense.
Which at the time, I think at that point in time, wasn't really in Godzilla, because it's only like the 70s, right? So
this is late 70s. This is 77. So this is Heisei Godzilla, early Heisei Godzilla.
Maybe it was.
Or like very late Showa.
If it's late Showa, they don't have the budget for it. If it's early Heisei, then maybe. Because I feel like early Heisei is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
Right, stuff like that.
Yeah. Man.
That economic miracle money, baby.
Yeah. Giant robots.
Supposedly, though, I mean, I think maybe the tape effect. Who knows? Like the dissolving effect, I think probably.
I think this film is very experimental.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's doing stuff without even knowing what the hell it's doing. They shot the movie without storyboards.
Right. And it like this entire film is just look.
But that's a lot of confidence too.
Yeah,
shooting without storyboards is confident. I mean, there's a lot of confidence in this movie.
I think it's also since it is Obayashi's like kind of brainchild or passion project, or 2 years in the lab cooking, right?
Okay.
He probably did have like a much more rounded out vision, I guess, which would make it easier to be able to shoot for 2 months without a proper storyboards or whatever.
Well, and they had explored other avenues of the story too in the radio drama.
It doesn't feel unfocused. That's the thing, though. The most unfocused parts about the film are like the Togo side stories, because that like completely just is separate from the main core of it all. And really, what you assume would be the crux of the film's emotional kind of like conflict would be the relationship between Gorgeous and her dad and her stepmom, which is not the point of the film at all.
Well, her stepmom shows up at the end, and then she shakes hands with her, and she's incinerated.
And that's it. Her stepmom's in like 2 scenes.
Yeah. Also, though, she's kind of like one of low-key my favorite characters because visually there's some really weird stuff with her. So
oh, she looks like she's in like her own commercial every single shot. She looks like
she's in like a hair commercial for
like
sure.
Either a hair commercial or like some kind of women's
detergent
beauty product or like go vacation now, da 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 type.
Well, it's interesting. So when she shows up at the beginning, she basically has been in hiding on the balcony.
Yeah.
So Gorgeous is like really excited to see her dad. He's come back from abroad. They were supposed to go somewhere together during summer vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's so jealous because they're gonna go somewhere so nice and so cool. And then she's like hugging her dad, and he's like, I actually have someone I want you to meet. And then like all of time slows down, and like wind is blowing, and the
like
music
her scarf is
different.
like flowing in the wind.
Scarf's going everywhere.
She's wearing all white, and
she looks kind of like a ghost.
Yeah, actually.
And she's like comes up and she just wants to shake her hand, and immediately Gorgeous is like incensed and like runs off or whatever. You don't see this woman again until the end, and when she shows up, it's kind of similar like that. Like the music is flowing, like the wind is blowing. She's like just beautiful and entrancing, and then she's fucking incinerated.
Yeah, I mean, this woman really, her crime is being a stepmom.
Yeah, I guess. Well, evil stepmoms, you know.
She's not even evil.
Yeah, she didn't seem that evil. I don't know. Dad didn't seem that great though. Something about him was weird to me. Especially like if you think about it, like
he was such a nothing character.
I know, but also like in Japanese, like you're not really supposed to say like confident, you know, compliments about yourself. And like immediately when he comes in, he starts talking about how awesome he is and how other people thought he was so sick.
Like a braggart.
Yeah,
I guess.
Which is like not really like in the West, it's not as weird if you do that, but in Japanese, it's pretty weird if you.
Actually, no, that makes a whole lot of sense because like, you know, it's kind of very similar in Korea and Korean culture. It's like bragging about yourself is very like.
Yeah.
I mean,
doesn't make you look good.
It doesn't make you look good, and if anything, it makes you look worse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of why, for me personally, I have a hard time like, you know, speaking about like myself in general because it just sounds like, you know, I'm coming off in any sense as a braggart.
No, it's tough.
But no, I didn't pick that up. But that's like such an interesting kind of take because he has such little characterization. So I guess you gotta.
But he like shows up, and we know he's rich, and he's playing.
Yeah, you
like,
gotta extrapolate whatever you can.
Yeah, you aren't given a lot of information.
It is shot very interestingly, like when he shows up, Gorgeous interacting with her dad.
What I think is really weird about that scene is the chair, that weird like chair that's kind of a swing.
Yeah, it's kind of blocking like a bit of the view, I guess, or whatever. But it's also shot through like this glass kind of wall,
like from the inside of the apartment. I don't know. It's just weird about it because also there's like a weird part where her stepmom sits down and like sits up to like is like trying to talk to her husband, and she's like spinning around because the chair is kind of like hard to control. I don't think they anticipated that chair. I think they looked interesting, visually looked interesting, so they included it. I don't think they realized that it's actually kind of a blocking nightmare to like have a chair you're working with like constantly be rotating. But anyways, I like this movie. I think it's a really cool special movie. It's a very easy watch. It's an hour and a half, and it's like visually iconic.
It's shorter than an hour and a half, actually. I think
that's probably true, actually, because I think
like an hour and 20.
Yeah, it's like an hour 20 and then credits, basically. Yeah,
and it's a very, like you said, very easy watch. I really like this film. I mean, I recommended it to anyone who, even if you have like, if this is your first horror film, go ahead, watch it. There's nothing like...
No, this is a good beginner horror film for anyone, and it's also a good beginner Japanese horror film because it's not particularly freaky, but it does have like some of the zest. Yeah. You know?
If you're in it for the weird, this is also like a perfect film for you too.
Yeah, it's a weird film too. And it's a background music movie too. I mean, it's honestly, there's a reason why it's on the Criterion Collection. Right?
Yeah. So. I mean, go give it a watch. What's the worst that can happen, right?
You could get eaten by a piano.
Your house could get possessed by an evil domestic cat spirit.
Yeah, by an evil cat. If you have any evil cats around, you might love this movie.
But I'm tapped out.
Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you, anyone who's still sticking around, for watching. We hope to catch you next time. It is October, and this is our first video for October. This is also our 10th episode.
Oh, hell yeah.
Woohoo! 10-10. Wow, what a coincidence. We hope to be, for the next couple episodes, we're actually going to be doing some horror-related content. So stick around for that if that's interesting for you. But, you know, thank you again for watching. That's it from us. Bye-bye.